Thank you, sir, for joining us on this broadcast. This week is a big one for the country. Kenyans marking 10 years since the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, and we've been talking to key players in that journey, and we wanted to get your thoughts on this day. Let's get into it. What does the journey to the 2010 Constitution mean for you?
I think not just for me, Ben, and welcome, but I think for every Kenyan, because a constitution literally touches the lives as well as the aspirations of a whole people populated together as a country. So that's why, for instance, the name Wanjiku, representing every ordinary Kenyan, was invented, and I think the whole thing started with the late President Moi when he said, does Wanjiku understand what you people are talking about? So after 1991, at Article 2A and reversal to pluralism, then of course the fight for leadership. And you see the Moi succession coming into taking a center stage. And when we now said Kibaki Tosha, and then what happened after that, a constitutional moment was created. Indeed, the very essence of Kibaki's win was premised on the agreements that we had had with him. And I remember Mzee Kibaki said, we don't need a lot of time, we need even 2 weeks to amend the constitution, give the country a new constitution. We had looked at 90 days. Instead of the 90 days, we ended up with a thing that was akin to Boma's draft. And I want to talk about Boma's draft and the tremendous work that Professor Yash Pogai and the team of the CKRC, Constitutional Review Commission of Kenya, the wonderful work they did and brought actually to the fore the Boma's draft. Now, Boma's draft, to a lot of people who may not have read it, was a very solid document. And some of us have been very clear in our statements, in our wish that we wish that this country adopted the CKRC document, Boma's draft, because it had, I think the members were about 629. And every time there was a meeting at Boma's, on average 400 people were turning up. All the members of parliament were actually members of Boma's draft, of the Boma's conference, and they did constitute about a third. But a lot of them, because of busy schedules here and there, may not have been there. But on average, about 400 people. I'm told there are about 35,000 written submissions. And that commission went everywhere and collected and collated the views of Kenyans with regard to the constitution that they wanted. So what happened after we saw in President Kibaki was instead of now implementing the Boma's draft, we ended up with a Kilifi draft, sometimes infamously referred to as a Wako draft, because we thought that was an affront to what Kenyans had agreed upon. And therefore, the constitutional referendum of 2005, where the country had the oranges and the bananas, I was on the side of saying no to the Kilifi draft, along with my other colleagues. And of course, we were able to defeat that effort.
So as we come to that, Mheshimiwa, just take you slightly backward. When you won power in 2002 with President Mwai Kibaki, there was a promise of a new constitution. How hard was it going from 2002 to 2005 to the bananas and oranges?
It was difficult because we had signed between ourselves the famous MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, where we, in anticipation of wanting to bring to practical application recommendations of the Boma's draft, we had even, under the terms of the MOU, agreed that President Kibaki was going to be the presidential candidate, agreed between all of us, the late Kijano Amalo and myself to be vice presidents, Raila Odinga to be the prime minister, the late George Saitoti to be the first deputy prime minister, and then Charity Ngilu be the second deputy prime minister, and also Kipruto Arap Kirwa to be the third deputy prime minister, and Mzee Anko Mudiawori to be the chief minister. That was the structure of the MOU. And between 2002 and 2005, had that been implemented, because where the rain started beating us is when our brother Kijana Wamalwa slept. People expected the other deputy president to become deputy president. But I recall I was attending a UN General Assembly meeting in New York, and then I saw Uncle Mudi had actually become the vice president. And so this story is contained in my own write-up, book that I'll give you at the end of this session, to see how political manipulation, political deceit, political insincerity has been our big undoing. If leaders were sincere in what they commit themselves to, this country would perhaps be very far in terms of our constitution making. So that complicated. Therefore, when we saw, instead of having now the draft, the Bomas draft, I recall that government delegation walked out of Bomas, and they, home minister, and then, left in a half. And then, instead of having the Bomas draft, which, the terms of which were pretty reflective of what we had agreed under the MOU, right. As you have heard me say. And that is basically what the structure of government then. It was supposed to be a parliamentary system. Bombers were very clear on the rights of the women and the children of this country, the marginalized group, the right also to correct historical injustices. All of that was contained in the Bomas draft. But that was thrown over the window, and then Kilifi draft came, and then, of course, we defeated it. And when we defeated the Kilifi draft, the next thing was elections following in 2007. Right. Which elections, if we had adopted the Bomas draft, I personally believe Kibaki would have had a very smooth second term. Nobody would have run against him. Maybe some person can run, people like Mukaru Nganga and others who would be there to run. But the chief political players, I think, were all unanimous. Had we implemented the MOU, had we also implemented the Bomas draft, I think Kibaki's second term would have been smooth, and therefore, by implication, we would not have had the hostilities that we saw following the 2007 general elections. Yeah, so and you can see how important constitution making is. If you literally word mess around with it, the country can come to grief, as happened in 2007.
So 2005, bananas and oranges. How difficult was it going against your president in that referendum?
Well, it was not easy. First of all, I think President Kibaki gave us a very clear indication when, as literally says, the final straw that broke the camel's back was when Raila called me, was inspecting roads somewhere in Taita Taveta, and he was Minister for Public Works, I was Foreign Minister, and Saitoti was in Education, Mudi Awori was in Home Office, and because these were like holding positions waiting for implementation of the MOU. And he told me the president intends to make some slight adjustments. He tells me that none of us will lose our positions. What happened was his docket included public works and housing. The housing docket was taken away. I was removed from foreign affairs to environment, and therefore we realized, this is now the end of the MOU. The spirit of the MOU had gone missing. So it was difficult, because then after that, when we defeated the bananas at the referendum, And the next thing we saw was our names were missing out of the cabinet formation, and people like Mzee Nyachai were brought in, we were thrown out. And the stage, therefore, was set for a proper political confrontation, which happened in 2007.
Let's talk about it before we come into the implementation. So the bananas and oranges, the orange was quite significant to this country's political history, because that is where ODM Kenya party, your party, came from. Later split with ODM. I don't know who ran with what party or with what fruit. Talk to us about that.
Yes. You see now, when the late Samuel Kivuitu, the chairman of the Electoral Commission, decided to give the country two fruits, the oranges and the bananas, personally I was very happy, because it was very easy to talk about this Caliphate draft is like a banana republic. We don't want Kenya to be a banana republic. And that time, the world was also experiencing, particularly in former USSR territories, what they are calling the Orange Revolution. And so it was actually a moment, not just a constitutional moment, but I think a revolutionary moment in this country. And I remember I was attending a meeting in Canada, in Halifax, when my colleagues were congregating in Kisumu. I remember talking to Najib Balala and telling him, announce that we are going to make Orange a political party. Yeah, and that's what happened. So we came and agitated for formation of Orange Democratic Movement, but the government could not allow it. I remember leading General Kaiseri and others to go and demand registration at Sharia House of ODM Kenya, because we said, okay, you don't register ODM Kenya.
Right.
So that is how ODM Kenya was born. And eventually, of course, then when the orange is now split, because we did not have a mechanism even to agree on choosing a presidential flag bearer. So I think the government side at that time decided, wow, we'll split these guys. So kumbe they had secretly registered ODM of Mr. Manyara from those sides of Meru, which my friends in the other side now, when we did not agree, and when ODM Kenya literally broke down in Mombasa at the famous Hadija Gardens meeting, well, because we knew now we cannot continue. And I remember asking people, I left us when we were in oranges. Now people came with a hammer, glorifying a car, and then they moved from the hammer car to the real hammer, Nyundo, and they realized this is becoming a little tricky, and people were forcing a situation. So the end of ODM, as it was, then split to ODM Kenya, and then eventually the others were able to acquire ODM of Manyara. And so we went into elections in 2007, yeah, as ODM Kenya on my part. I was the party leader, and Raila Odinga was leading the other ODM. So we even I remember I used to jokingly say, we didn't even know how to divide the oranges. One had a complete orange, the other one had an orange and a half. So that unfortunately was a very difficult moment for Kenya.
There's always this debate over who ran away from what. Is it ODM Kenya who ran away, or is it ODM who split off? There's always a story, I don't know how true it is, of the Makueni MP running away
Daniel
with a
Manzo.
certificate.
He didn't run away from a certificate. The idea was our political think tank group said, we cannot allow this impudence. Yeah, this is a wrong attitude. So since Daniel Manzo was registered as a chairman, and a lady called Aluga, who still works in Parliament as the treasurer, and another young man from Kapsoar and Marakwet as a secretary general, yeah, and these were people who said we don't like what is happening. So we said we will not allow people to take the party away from us. So Manzo stuck to his guns. Now that's what they call running away with the party. So these others are the ones who took off actually, because they went and bought off the other ODM. The one registered by the system. They got it. But we remained with the ODM Kenya.
Nevertheless, the 2010 constitution was finally promulgated in August 2010. How important was that moment for the country?
Well, that was a very important moment. If Kenyans will recall, it was at Uhuru Park when it was inaugurated. I personally believe that such an important day, Constitution 2010, the month of August 27th, I think, should be a constitutional day. But that is a matter for debate. Because one of the things that happened at Bomas was, for instance, a chapter on the Bill of Rights was so exhaustively debated and agreed upon that I believe personally we have the best expression in terms of the rights of the citizens and the chapter dealing with the Bill of Rights. So everybody knows that perhaps this is one of the best constitutions, because there are countries like the UK who do not even have constitutions, they follow traditions. But for countries with written constitutions, the Kenyan Constitution 2010 has been universally acclaimed as a very important document, of course borrowing heavily on the, as I said, the Professor Poyash Guy team, and who had done an exhaustive job on the Bill of Rights, and of course the famous chapter 6 on integrity and values, and you know, really this is important. So Constitution 2010 is important, but on the other hand, there are certain aspects of it where people in a hurry, and that is where some people misunderstood some of us when I said, wait a minute, why don't we first of all work towards a document that embraces a unified approach. And if we can end up with a non-contested referendum, that would be the best thing. But people in a hurry. In the process, came up with the situation where the country now does not even a provision for deputy ministers. You have 22 or so ministers, no deputies, so which now forced President Uhuru Kenyatta eventually to create what is referred to as CAS, Chief Administrative Secretaries, to try and fill in the gap. There were lots of gaps that were left, but on the whole, this, remember people used to say 80% of the Constitution is good, 20% needs amendment, and I believe that is what has inspired the current clamoring for amendment to the Constitution.
What do you think about this moment that the President has called a constitutional moment? Is this really the moment to change the Constitution of Kenya 2010?
Well, I think what the President had in mind was the fact that this country should do away with the culture of high tension leading into bloodshed after every general election. If there's a way we can make sure that after every election people live normally, and people can even after voting go home. But you remember he used to say that we don't trust what is happening here. Yeah, wakihesabu tutahesabu, wakijumulisha tunajumulisha. High mistrust and the conduct of the IEBC. I think that is what the President had in mind. But of course it also follows the famous handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. That handshake has given the country another opportunity to review the Constitution. Whether or not it's a constitutional moment, I think is a matter that Kenyans have been debating. I personally think there is need to amend our Constitution. This is why we have come up with support. My own political party, Wiper Democratic Movement, gave a presentation before the Yusuf Haji team, the BBI team, and we talked about the structure of government. We talked about the need to correct some of these situations that are seen to be like there's always some tension between the Senate and the National Assembly. And in our submission, the Senate should be the upper house, and so that the Speaker of the Senate should actually be the chair of Parliament when it comes to that. So we need to, therefore, make sure that this country does away with some of these problems. But I must also quickly add, Ben, the problem has been lack of proper implementation of Constitution 2010. As we speak, the 2/3 gender rule has never been complied with. So people can, and you hear some people, members of the Law Society, I think President Harvey of the LSK, wanting to say this parliament, the parliament, I think 12 parliament should be done away with because they have failed the country. I do not think that is a way to go, but we need to accept that when it comes to practical application of the provisions of some of the provisions of Constitution 2010, we have not done well. There are others, because there's one thing to talk about the letter of the Constitution, but the spirit is equally important. Where you find the spirit is missing, then you end up with, in my view, situations which are really anti-constitutional, unconstitutional if you like.
One of the key pillars of the BBI process, as has been proposed, is to deal with the issue of political inclusivity. And it's in that document, it's still ongoing, the process. But in your personal opinion and views, what do you think is a permanent cure for this problem of winner take all?
Yeah, inclusivity is important. A recognition that we are a nation of 42, 43 nationalities existing as one country. And this is where our friends the Tanzanians beat us. Because when Mwalimu Nyerere took Tanzania through Ujamaa, although eventually accepted it was like a mistake, we had taken a different route here, following the enunciation of sessional paper number 10 of 1965. On African socialism and its application to democracy. We did not stop to address the problem of tribalism in Kenya. And this, I think, is a matter we must face on, and I think this is what President Uhuru and Raila are saying, and all of us, because we have come out fully and equivocally in support of the BBI. So an occasion then arises where we have to do something.
The issue of political inclusivity and the winner-take-all process, did the handshake begin the proper process to address this, in your opinion?
Well, there are those, of course, who have been critical of the handshake itself. But as I said earlier, we, as a Wiper Democratic Movement, came out fully in support. I remember I was away in Germany when we boycotted the repeat elections following the annulment of the 2017 presidential election. And when I came back, there was a lot of tension, January 2018. And I remember actually from this place calling on both President Uhuru and Raila to embrace the spirit of dialogue. So when I saw them doing the handshake, personally I was very, very happy because the country was actually on the brink and at a crossroads. And so regardless of what people may have said about the secrecy of the meetings, because I, for one, having been Raila Odinga's running mate, I only saw him when he pulled out a written speech to read outside Harambee House. He never informed me, okay? But even then, I said, this is bold, this is good, yeah? He must have had reasons why he didn't want us, some of us, to be privy to it. And I forgave him for it. And I said, the most important thing is dialogue. And the dialogue thing is important. And therefore, since that time, the country has seen a measure of relative peace. Never mind the challenges we have with COVID-19 and a lot of problems with joblessness and heavy debt burden. These are things that can be addressed when the nation is together. So the effect of the handshake was to put the country together. Now, we cannot therefore rely going forward on handshakes. We must have a framework, a legal framework, that will make sure that whoever is the leader of this country will not necessarily have to depend on the goodwill of others to handshake and to do things. So the country must move on. There are generations to come that need to find a happy and well-established nation state. But the practice hitherto, Ben, has been, it was our turn to eat. Huu ni wakati wetu wa kukula. Others have eaten. That kind of mentality must be gotten rid of so that Kenyans can think in terms of whoever is the president, I am safe, my children are safe, and the future generations are safe. So because of that, I have personally supported the BBI, and I would want to see an occasion when we can use this time to correct those imbalances that need to be corrected and then move on with confidence to the future.
There are those people who say that that handshake disrupted the minority side of governance, what has been termed as the opposition, and therefore denied Kenyans the privilege of having somebody to check what the executive is up to. Do you think?
Well, the majority party on the opposition side, NASA, and I think Kenyans don't need to be reminded that we have an existing coalition as of now called the National Super Alliance. Documents are public documents registered with the Registrar of Political Parties, but the conduct of some of our political formations, like ODM, I remember during the Kibra by-election, for instance, they used to say, their Secretary General openly used to say, NASA is dead, and that kind of thing. So therefore, the spirit of NASA is actually dead. And therefore, Kenyans have reason to feel concerned that we do not have a functioning opposition. Truth be told, that is a reality. Because when we saw that this insincerity when it comes to these matters, Wiper Democratic Movement took a position. We called a National Executive Council, and we agreed to go into a post-election coalition, cooperation with Jubilee. And of course, even now, members are saying, we want to go the full hog and form a proper coalition agreement and stop the pretense that you're in opposition when everybody is actually out in government. So it's like, again, but one must also look, Ben, at the national good. I think the most important thing is to prepare this country for the next election. We should be democratic, which will be devoid of rigging, which will address the problems that we also, because the matter of IEBC was itself one of the 9 points covered between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, that we need to reform the IEBC. Everybody knows there's a problem at the IEBC. So opposition, functioning opposition, yeah, on paper, ODM are the majority. That's why if they were to follow Wiper Democratic Movement and to sign a coalition agreement with Jubilee, then that will mark formally the death of official opposition as stipulated under the Constitution. Right. But since our big brothers were saying, because as of now they have the majority, there are more members of parliament, followed by Wiper, and then I think our other sister formations between, I think, ANC and Ford Kenya, right, and Mashinani. Wiper actually is the third largest political party. Our intention is to prepare this party to be the majority party in the next elections or after the next elections. Right. So it's all about planning for the future. There's nothing criminal about that. And recognition that since there are people saying NASA is dead, so why don't we leave them to be official opposition, or whatever remains of official opposition, while us we are practical and we want to move on.
Right. I have to ask you this. You've addressed it several times in the past. You said you would never work with Jubilee. What did change?
I think that was actually also misconstrued. I would want you to look at the exact wording. Right. When I talked about I'd rather be a sweeper or something like that, right? What I meant was that time was the heat of the campaigns, all right? And that time there were people who were thinking we could join Jubilee before the last elections. And I was saying that cannot happen. That has changed. A lot of water has since gone under the bridge. And Jubilee as constituted, have I not seen that President Uhuru Kenyatta has taken full control of Jubilee? So I'm saying, and Wiper is saying, because President Uhuru Kenyatta has come out and said he is fighting against corruption, he is also upholding the very important national priorities like working towards Vision 2030, making this economy a middle-income economy, and also uniting this country. Those are the values that Wiper stood for and continues to stand for. And so we say, particularly in his fight against corruption, based on what he has demonstrated so far, and appointment of very efficient officers, a director of the DCIL, Director of Criminal Investigation, Mr. Kinoti, Mr. Yusuf Haji, Director of Public Prosecution, and the Executive of Anti-Corruption Commission. Right. I think if these institutions work together, they will be able to deal a deathly blow on corruption. Because even now, as we speak, people are talking about KEMSA scandal, people are talking about all manner of scandals. And I think myself, President Uhuru, and I told him, I said actually, if he blinked, because the low-lying fruit in terms of his Agenda 4 formulation, the low-hanging fruit, in my view, is that of the fight against corruption. Because he has the opportunity to stamp out corruption now, and therefore set a very good legacy. So this is why some of us are wondering, even as we talk about KEMSA, what happened to Arol Dam and Kimwarar Dam scandal? I think there's also very slow turning of the wheels of justice. What happened effectively, NYS scandal? What became of it? I think we need to slay this dragon once and for all, the dragon of corruption.
All right.
Yeah.
Before we leave the Constitution alone, tell me this, because one of the things that are in this BBI process is changing the structure of governance in this country. Would you say that we were wrong as a country to go for a fully presidential system back with the 2010 Constitution?
Personally, I would have preferred if we went the full hog and implemented the Bomas draft, which had formulated a parliamentary system, but not with an executive premier. The Bomas draft had envisioned a situation where we have a president, a deputy president, a prime minister, and deputy premiers who are also having substantial authority. And that, I think, would have given that structure of government, for me, that particular structure of government would come out handy for this country. But what happened when our political leaders went to Naivasha, some kind of horse trading happened. And I've seen that Professor Yash Pogai, in his write-up, has referred to that. The bit of gerrymandering, the kind of other overriding political interests, and we ended up with a pure presidential American system of government. Now, where now we have 47 mini presidents, call them governors, okay? And we have a president, never mind the executive authority, I think, has been checked, system of checks and balances, because president sometimes cannot just appoint a person, they have to go through the vetting. And even that vetting, because of the committee system and what we adopted in Naivasha, in my view, gave birth to another form of corruption through vetting of presidential appointees by committees of parliament. Another avenue of eating and stealing and plundering, and therefore literally rubbishing the spirit of the letter and the letter of the Constitution 2010. Okay. So that would have been the best thing. But having said that, now we have a pure presidential system. I don't think anybody in this country wants to hear of anything different. You cannot touch even the smallest of the counties, say Lamu. You cannot touch them. They have now a sense of entitlement. And this is why even under the BBI negotiations, I cannot recall anybody wanting to say get rid of the 47 counties. While under Bomas, had we gone the Bomas way, we would have ended up with 14, 15 regions. And if we were going to have governors, there would have been 15 of them. But now we have 47. And that is why even in my presentation, a county, big county like Kitui County, should have had 2 counties. Yeah? Mwingi and Kitui. Everybody knows that. In Kisii, there should have been Gucha County. And in Meru, there should have been Nyambene County, okay? And then you ended up with 50 of them. If we wanted then to work out, a situation of justice, and I made this presentation before BBI, because that is now the reality, and because the important thing was devolution. We believe, as Wiper Democratic Movement, personally believe, devolving power from the center to the bottom, to the grassroots, in order to create a situation of at least getting some benefits from the national government, from the national to the lower, to the grassroots is important. I remember when I ran for president in 2007, I used to say I want to demystify the presidency by removing things from Nairobi to the grassroots. Now, in spite of the fact that at the level of the county governments, we have witnessed a lot of stealing of public resources.
Right.
At least we see that even if some county officials steal money, they go and put up structures in the villages. Yeah? And remember when Ascod, between myself, Wetangula and Raila, we even tried to assemble 1 million signatures in order to say we wanted devolution to get a bigger share, not just a 15%. We wanted it to go to 40%. Now I'm not quite so sure whether that is the way to go unless we stem the stealing, the plundering by county government officials and governors. It looks to me like the most fashionable thing for a governor is to build a hotel. I don't know whether they discuss between themselves and say, I send delegations to your county, then they'll stay in your hotel. I send others to your county. It looks like, because if you do some such, you'll be amazed. A number of governors have decided they want to invest in hotels. Where in 5 years do you get money to build a hotel? These are all county funds being misappropriated. And this is after we just give them 15%. If we give them 35% and 40%, what is going to happen? Therefore, full implementation of Constitution 2010. Chapter 6, which deals with integrity. Any public officer who is involved in plundering of resources meant to change the lives of the Kenyan people, create employment at those levels, I think these people should never be allowed even to run for high office. I know I'm making a very hard statement, but I think this country has reached a stage where if we are going to do away with corruption, then we need to call a spade a spade. There's too much. What I think one ambassador said, we have stolen everything and vomited over their shoes.
Right.
Literally.
All right. So what is the future of devolution from where you sit now?
Devolution is a must because Kenyans love it. And I'm sure as we go forward, a lot of governors will be thrown out, as happened in the case of Nigeria when they actually adopted the kind of constitution we have. Therefore, it doesn't worry me because Kenyans have come of age. They're able to assess. That is why the call for further impeachment. And when governors are put to account by the members of the county assemblies, they should not scream and look for excuses. They must know that the county assembly MCAs have a constitutional mandate of oversight. It looks like still there are some governors who need to accept the reality that devolution also comes with responsibility so that we safeguard Wanjiku's money. This is the end of the story. Therefore, personally, I want to suggest that MCA should never be cowed. Should never be cowed by governors who scream all manner of things against some of us. For instance, I've never been an MCA, I've never been a governor, all right? But we have to make sure that this country is properly governed.
Are there some MCAs, do you think, is there a loophole to use MCAs to harass some of those governors, like party leaders like yourself, that accusation has been made?
Yeah, I said that people have said that I have been involved, and I want to say, I've said it before, I have nothing to do with that. We have never, as the Wiper Democratic Movement, called a meeting and said impeach Governor so-and-so. No. That is not the way to do business. We want governors to feel. In fact, one time at a big conference we called Komarok, I said that county assembly members should not unnecessarily harass the governors as well. If there are MCAs who also take that opportunity to want to extort money from governors by bringing flimsy things, then those equally, they must also be held to account. And in fact, in that case, I think there must be agencies that should deal with them. But you have heard of cases where governors ban whole county offices in order to hide evidence. So these are the enemies of devolution. But devolution is important, right, and I think we have to continue advocating for the same.
My last question on this BBI issue. Would you support a referendum before, during, or after the next election?
In fact, I'm really perturbed why we are not hearing from the Yusuf Haji committee, because it had been hoped that as soon as former Prime Minister Raila Odinga came from Dubai, they would have a meeting with President Uhuru, or they will receive a report. I do not know what is actually delaying the process, because one would want a situation where if we are to do a referendum, it should be this year, as opposed to, because admittedly, you cannot touch the structure of government without going for a referendum. There are issues that can be legislated by both the Parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate, but there are others which are core. And under its own formulation, Constitution 2010 says if you want to touch, for instance, the structure of government, you must go for a referendum. So, in my view, if I was asked, a referendum should have been this year, before the end of this year. Because you go into 2021, you're now looking at 2022, and people may confuse issues between the next general election and the referendum. However, I do not have a fixed mind on this position. It is important to listen to what the country is also saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Ukambani politics. And I know your objective is to become a national...
Ben, why Ukambani politics? I'm a national leader. Why don't we talk about Homa Bay politics or,
exactly.
or Rift Valley politics?
That's exactly my question.
Thank you.
How important do you think your home turf is to your national politics?
Well, this is part of the problem that we must address as a people. So that if one wants to run for high office in this country, they do not necessarily have to rely on their tribe's people and their tribe. Because you heard me talk about people saying it is our turn to eat, it is our turn to do ABC, it's our turn to govern, because people have associated running for high office with the possibility of faster development. Now, that should not be the case. Having said that, all of us know that the main political party formations have their own strongholds. And it so happens that Ukambani is a stronghold of Wiper Democratic Movement. But Wiper Democratic Movement is a national movement. Look at our own structure at the national level. I don't think, in fact, there's a political party more inclusive, more nationwide than Wiper. Because we have Ambassador Ali Chirao, who is our national chair. He's from the coast and from Kwale. We have two deputy party leaders, one from Garissa, yeah. Everybody knows about Mr. Speaker, Farah Mahalim, and Shakil Abdallah. Again, very representative. I have a deputy, one of my deputy leaders is a lady, to give recognition to the importance of women in this country. Now, you look at the vice chairs, the deputy chairs, deputy to Makwere. We have Bwana Kamaro from Narok, a renowned lawyer, who is one of the deputy chairs. We have a friend from Kisii called Victor Swanya Ogeto. Yeah, he's the other deputy chair. We have Mutula Jr. In his own right. One can say if it was Mutula Jr. and myself, perhaps, but you can see the only Kambas there are just two, Mutula and myself, the party leader. And then we have then the host of other leaders, Secretary General, Senator Judy Sijene. She comes all the way from USA, Ugenya, Siaya, and Alego. Yeah. So you can see this is a national movement. We have members of parliament elected, a member of the Parliamentary Service Commission, a member for Borabu, Honorable Ben Momanyi, all the way from Nyamira. He's a member of Wiper, not even first termer, I think second termer, all right? We have somebody called RK, member for Wajir East, yeah? Again, Wiper member of parliament. Therefore, we are talking about a national movement. And let me tell you, we are moving very solidly into every corner of this republic. It was going to be a shock. There are people who have challenged me to call for a rally at Uhuru Park. I want them to know, given the earliest opportunity, Wiper Democratic Movement will call for national rallies, we'll organize, we will move, we will have crowds like you have never seen before, because this country is crying out for the true leader to emerge after President Uhuru Kenyatta.
There are those people who say that Ukambani is up for grabs. I don't know what that means, but they say that.
I don't know. Those are wishful thinkers. You know, you must always accept there will be dreamers, there will be naysayers, there will be negative forces, because they know what is coming, and they know it very well, very, very well. And they can see it coming. So they have to, by chance, Satan may want to reward them. But let me tell you, that region is solid, very solid. Very, very solid, and they are supporting, and I really do not have words with which to thank them. Right. Our professionals, our business people, the honorary people, the students in universities, public universities, the young Wiper Democrats, wherever they are. I mean, it's amazing. So it's a movement that is not stoppable. All right. So anybody who is really not on that, I do not think, they probably will only have themselves to blame. Because as we say, how many members of parliament do we have from that region? There are very many. Wiper has nearly 30, I think 32 members of parliament, right, both in the Senate and the National Assembly. And over 120 MCAs. Now that is a huge political movement, my friend.
What are your thoughts on the Makueni Governor Kivutha Kibwana's presidential ambitions?
No, everybody has a right to aspire to leadership. I've said this openly. Not just him, I think even Alfred Mutua said he wants to be president. Yeah, so everybody has a right to aspire. You cannot deny anybody what is basically their basic human right and their constitutional right. It's another story, however, when it comes to whether people have the following.
All right, let's talk about, as we wind up, the stalemate currently in the Senate over the revenue sharing formula among the 47 counties. What is your position as a Wiper Party leader?
I've actually announced severally, pronounced myself in position of the party on this matter. We recognize that every Kenyan is entitled to receive services, wherever they are. There are some of them who actually get together as counties which are more densely populated than others. We recognize this. And I say that there are actually poor people, even in those most densely populated counties. They have a right to be served. But where that happens at the expense of others who are marginalized, this is why Constitution 2010 and the Bombers draft, again, if we really lived the letter and the spirit of the Bombers draft, all these issues about marginalization were addressed. And Constitution 2010 has got under, I should have actually looked for the article itself on marginalization. Those areas that are marginalized should not be left behind. Therefore, in their wisdom, the formulators of the document came up with equalization fund. I do not understand why. And when the committee of 12 senators who were formed to look into this, if they only listen to what I told them, I hope they have a time to look at, because they're looking at some different formulations. But nobody is answering my question. Why is it that we have not properly applied the provisions of the Constitution on equalization fund? Because no Kenyan then will be left behind. At the moment, that figure is given as 0.05% of I think, the GDP. If I was in Parliament today and encouraging them, both in National Assembly and the Senate, right, regardless of what they're debating now, because they seem to have committed themselves that they will now come up with a formula, and I wish them well, because every Kenyan should be given, should actually be reached by way of essential services. But they should look at the constitutional provision. I started by saying, Ben, the problem has been the implementation of the letter and the spirit of the Constitution. Nobody to date has actually properly implemented the clause on equalization funds. If you raise this to about 10%, you can imagine nobody in this country complain. Because people in Mandera, people in Kitui, people in Homa Bay, people in Isabenia, everybody in Kwale, people in central Kenya, in Meru, in Laikipia, in Kiambu. Kiambu is heavily populated, and they have lots of poor people in that place who need to be reached with services in this city of Nairobi. But people are playing heavy politics with it. If we just settle down and apply equalization fund, then this formula, and again, I think myself, I'm not so sure whether the commission, the CRA, Revenue Allocation Commission itself, I think the parameters that they gave are also a problem. Because somebody would, to walk away from say in Garissa, to come to the nearest health center or dispensary, maybe a long distance. So in fact, those people should be given a plus for trying, but apparently under their formula, they're penalized. This is why people like those need equalization fund. So this whole thing is at the risk of dividing the country. We cannot allow it, and I'm sure when the Senate next meets, they'll be able to adopt the recommendations of the Committee of 12.
All right. You had a cooperation deal with Jubilee, the president's party. What is your take on how the government has been trying to pass its agenda in Parliament? We had a situation last week where 3 senators were arrested, and a lot of people connected that to the government trying to tilt, the advantage to its side.
I think everybody has come out openly and said that is what I mean by not living the spirit of the Constitution. You cannot just harass people like that. It's not right. We have come out openly on that, and we have heard the stories that some of these people also may have received monies. This is very disheartening. Received monies and to vote certain ways, and then they are not playing ball, and then if these stories are true, then they are disheartening. They really are disheartening. But every Kenyan is entitled to protection under the law. And if one has to be arrested and apprehended, also in accordance with the law. I happen to be, of course, a senior counsel, and I can tell you that anything unconstitutional would certainly not meet with my approval, and that was high-handedness, the arrest of those 3 senators, because it gave the wrong impression about how government should operate. But having said that, Wiper is in cooperation with Jubilee, and that is an ongoing matter, and hopefully we can even go into a coalition agreement.
All right.
Yeah.
Finally, Kenya is in a pandemic. The world is in a pandemic. What is your message to the nation at this time?
We must keep hope alive that this pandemic will be defeated. We must know that these are very extraordinary times, and yet the reality is the whole world is engulfed with this pandemic. Parallels have been drawn to the famous Spanish flu, I think of 1918 or thereabouts. But let us hope a vaccine will be found soon. Let us hope that Kenyans will go back to their normal way of life soon. But before that happens, please, please, observe social distance like you're observing. Wear your mask, wash your hands, and just make sure that this thing doesn't catch up with you. It is important. And therefore very disheartening to hear of allegations of corruption when it comes to the fight against this pandemic.
Let's talk about that for a minute. You've talked about the need to fight corruption, but corruption during a pandemic is really a new law for this country, isn't it?
It is terrible. It is terrible, and the truth must come out fastest. You remember I said that President Uhuru Kenyatta has a low-lying fruit, and that is a fight against graft. He has come out very strongly on this. I believe he'll come out with guns blazing and giving full instructions to Kinoti, to DPP and others to deal with these criminals who will be stealing from our people during a pandemic of all the times.
All right. My final question to you. There are political pundits in this country who say that Kalonzo Musyoka should start preparing himself to be a transitional leader. There are those who say Kalonzo still has a lot to offer this nation. What is your political future?
Well, God shapes an individual's destiny. And I believe that God in His wisdom has clearly elaborated the direction we should take. As of now, it is clear, whenever the next elections are called, we will run for election as President of the Republic of Kenya. This is as clear to me as it is to a lot of Kenyans. And I don't think that anything should cloud that vision. It is actually time, post-COVID. We moved swiftly to embrace what I called for in 2007, a 24-hour working nation. How else are we going to deal with this joblessness? I've also called openly that in order to really position this country, and I don't know what you mean by transitional president or transitional leader, to me, we need to think very solidly, and I said it during the BBI rally in Mombasa, that we need to make Mombasa a free port. And what will happen, instead of people going to Dubai, Dubai will come to Mombasa. That is how to remain competitive. These are clear visions, very clear visions, because then we'll be able to give hope to so many of our Kenyans who are so desperate for employment. One cannot imagine how this country will look like for the next 5 to 10 years in terms of job opportunities. And yet we must work like bees. We must renegotiate those commitments of a financial type with our development partners and other lenders, which are not in the best interest of this country at this time. So there's a lot of work to be done between now and 2022 and beyond. And we are ready for it.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. Thank you. I can give you a copy.
I will make sure I read it.
All the best. Read it.
Yes, I'll read it.
You might find it good.
I am sure I will. Thank you so much.
This is KTN News.